disguised millionaire in his own restaurant, was left shocked by 3 unexpected words that TRAN. Jake Anderson never thought he would feel like a ghost in his own life. On that crisp fall evening, he pulled his oversized hoodie tighter around him, shoving his hands into the pockets as if to bury himself deeper into anonymity. Rich and successful, yes, but utterly lost. Coming back to the heart of the Midwest, his pride and joy, he wanted to reconnect with the values that had once anchored him. Instead, he felt like a stranger in a place that was supposed to feel like home. As his feet carried him through the busy dining room, he was struck by the rich smells of stew simmering away and the warm scent of fresh-baked bread. It was so intimate, families seated close together, people smiling, laughter bubbling at every table. Yet, a nagging shadow clung to him. He overheard snippets of conversation, the weight of bills, worries spilling from the mouths of those he'd intended to uplift. Each word felt like a punch to the gut. A single mother juggling her children and multiple shifts, he thought, staring at a woman doing just that. An elderly veteran here, like a regular, who knows not just the staff, but the very heartbeat of this place. And then there was Annie, the waitress who looked like she'd been holding the world on her shoulders. He heard the whispers, the mention of near closure, and every pulse in his neck tightened as he leaned against the bar, enveloped in that false sense of camaraderie. Oblivious? No, he knew he had chosen his path, trading connections for independence, wealth for familiarity. As he hovered in that liminal space, caught between the happiness around him and the suffocating sense of responsibility, Jake began to grapple with regret. Hollow triumph invaded his cognitive sphere. Had his relentless drive for financial stability truly distanced him from everything he once valued? His heart sank as Annie nervously uttered, "I need you back." The quake in her voice echoed through him, stirring emotions he thought he buried: vulnerability, frustration, a longing for past stability. It was a bolt to his very core, compelling him to question everything. He realized that he had become a man who prioritized revenue over roots, success over soul. How had he let ambition overshadow compassion, responsibility, community? His breath quickened. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Annie's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and the anguish of her gaze felt like an indictment of his choices, as he battled the rising tide of anguish within him. The smell of that fresh bread, combined with memories of childhood dinners, struck him with a nostalgic ache, when family meant everything, and ambition didn't drown out love. The luxury of choice, he realized then, was also a burden. Caught at the crossroads of past and present, Jake felt the weight of expectation pushing down hard against his chest. He stared at Annie, on the verge of saying something, offering help, rekindling connection. Yet everything inside him screamed hesitation, as if fate held her breath in anticipation. Would he take a step back into the life he fled, or chase the void of hollow success? The dining room hummed, and Jake felt it, a roar in his ears, his heartbeat a loud reminder that all eyes were on him. What do I choose? What happens next? The dim lighting of the heart of the Midwest flickered gently, yet Jake's mind was illuminated by an internal spotlight. He struggled to articulate the feelings swirling within him like a tempest. The moment hung thick around them, one breath away from change, and he vacillated in his resolve. Could he dare to tread back into the world he consciously abandoned? Annie looked up at him, intent and unyielding, the emotional weight of her plea crashing into him like a wave. "You belong here, Jake," she urged, her voice trembling yet powerful, cutting through his doubts. It was a reminder of the man he used to be, the passionate individual whose heart thrummed with community spirit, not the detached businessman he had become. What was the price of his success? The soft sounds of laughter and familial warmth blended with gnawing regret. People around him had become shadows of his former life, gliding through their daily struggles while he, detached upon his reclusive pedestal, had been oblivious. Stripped of his illusions, he started to feel the prickling urgency of responsibility. He swallowed hard, the heat of decision drawing him back from the brink of inaction. Memories of late-night brainstorming with Annie swirled back to him, their shared visions for the restaurant, the dreams of community outreach and support that had filled their conversations. Gradually, an ember of determination began to spark. He began, faltering for just a moment, then steadied himself. I want to help. It felt too casual, but he couldn't ignore the fire igniting deep within him. With that single sentence, Jake initiated a shift, not only in his own approach but also in Annie's reaction, as hope flickered in her eyes. Behind his words, a flood of repressed emotions surged. Could he truly reconstruct what had been dismantled? The question loomed large, yet an unexpected clarity began to form. No longer could he hide under layers of success and anonymity. He needed to confront the source of his discontent head-on. Jake's gaze shifted around the room, taking in faces alive with energy and hope. Conversations seemed to swell around him, a melody of human connection. The realization hit fiercely. Every person here, from the single mother to the elderly veteran, was navigating their own struggles, and he had been more than a witness. He had a role to play. He straightened up, a sense of purpose washing over him. Annie, let's revive those plans we once had. We can bring some initiatives back to the restaurant, focused on the community. Let's work together to support people in need, he urged, feeling as though the scales were tipping toward his transformation. The allure of tangible impact was far more rewarding than numbers on a balance sheet. Annie's face lit up with cautious optimism. You mean it? Jake realized he was confronting an unsettling truth. The dual existence of his ambition and his moral compass had left him compromised. This resurgence of commitment ignited old flames of his values: compassion, connection, community. Yes, he replied firmly. I do mean it. We're going to make it work. Yet, deep down, uncertainty lingered. Would this path truly lead him back to the man he once was? And would his newfound commitment survive the external pressures of his ambitious nature? The stakes felt insurmountably high, each decision echoing through the lives of those who depended on him. As the last words left his lips, Jake sensed a shift in the air, a renewal of purpose but also the pull of past fears. What awaited him on this journey back? The moment of action was slipping into uncertainty, shadows lurking just out of sight. Could he actually change the narrative of his life? And more importantly, would he face the ghosts of choices past or forge ahead as an architect of future connections? The answer lurked dangerously close, as the tension coiled around him, more palpable than ever. What awaited him in this new chapter of purposeful living? And at what cost? The air in the heart of the Midwest pulsed with a renewed capacity for connection as Jake stepped further into his commitment. The heavy weight of uncertainty swirled in his mind, but each breath he took grew steadier, guided by the ember of conviction in his chest. He could feel the seeping warmth of purpose latch onto his spirit, and in return, it birthed a resolve he hadn't entertained in years. Annie's voice broke through the chatter, forcing him to focus. Okay, let's start with a new strategy. We need to prioritize how we can best serve our customers while also addressing community needs. Her eyes sparkled with determination, invigorating Jake as they began mapping out ideas. That's it, he replied, feeling the rhythm of teamwork ebb and flow. We can introduce a weekly food donation program and perhaps even a mentorship initiative for local youth, teaching them culinary skills. A palpable energy filled the room, intoxicating yet daunting. Jake's mind raced with the potential ramifications of their plans. What if they fell short? What if his return to this version of himself exposed weaknesses he had long buried? The corporate world was predictable, a stage he had mastered, but here vulnerability loomed like a specter, urging him to confront both his capability and doubt. Still, the desire to forge connections outweighed his fears. We need to gather feedback from employees too, he suggested, recalling his previous detachment. Encourage them to share their thoughts, what they see in the community, what they think we can do. Everyone should know their input matters. We've neglected that. Annie nodded approvingly, her enthusiasm a catalyst in this transformation. Trust can rebuild bridges. People want to feel authentic engagement. It's not just about serving food but serving them, knowing their stories. A sense of urgency prompted Jake's next thought. What would it take to shift his perception about success from profit margins to human impact? It would mean laying down the armor of authority he had cultivated during his years in higher-ups, embracing a form of leadership dictated by empathy rather than bottom lines. The weight of the decision felt monumental, as if he were teetering on the edge of self-discovery. Reinventing himself would require challenging every embedded notion of success he carried. The realization struck. Success wasn't solely defined by wealth or status, but rather the change it inspired in others. A quiet pause settled between Jake and Annie, their shared aspirations resonating deeply. Then, breaking the silence, Jake ventured, "I can't deny I still feel torn. There's a safety in the business realm that contrasts sharply with what we're about to undertake. Community involvement feels so messy. What if we fail? You must allow room for mistakes," Annie countered gently. "In trying to make a difference, you'll learn and grow. You'll find a version of yourself that can lead with care rather than mere metrics." The truth in her words fueled his ambition. Yet, an inner voice questioned if he was capable of leading from such a vulnerable space. Flashes of his past choices surged within his consciousness, times he had swayed toward greed over compassion. As the hours trickled by, Jake noted the warmth of camaraderie, the shared laughter, the hopeful exchanges he once envied. He felt a certain charisma beginning to return, a reminder of his charismatic self, buried beneath layers of corporate armor. But the more he opened up, the more the self-doubt crept in. Were these remnants of goodwill simply nostalgia masquerading as genuine ambition? Jake needed a plan, an actionable commitment that would steer this newfound purpose, something that would not only solidify his stint back in the community, but also validate his past choices. He had a responsibility not just to those he aimed to help, but also to himself. "Annie, I need one more thing," he said, his voice steadying as he reached clarity in his intent. "I want us to prepare for some transparency in this journey, not just with budgeting but with our struggles, moment to moment. We've got to share our successes and setbacks. Can you promise me that?" "Absolutely," she replied, admiration lacing through her words. That kind of honesty will create bonds too strong to break. But as they agreed, a nagging realization echoed amid their plans. Some adversities they couldn't anticipate would challenge their resolve. The discomfort of returning to this life was daunting. Whispers of impending confrontation lingered in the air. What if the very community they tried to serve would resist the change they sought? Would the past haunt him, rendering his new beginnings fruitless? Jake didn't yet know what lay ahead. The truth was becoming painfully clear. This endeavor was a testing ground, where vulnerabilities would be exposed, and he would have to confront scars both old and new. The moment filled with undeniable intensity. The risk of losing everything again loomed large as he took a breath and prepared for the next stage of transformation. The path he had chosen was fraught with uncertainty, but perhaps that was precisely where true growth could begin. As he pondered the next steps, a shadow formed in the doorway, a figure from his past, one he least expected to encounter, who might just challenge everything he thought he knew about returning. Jake's heart raced as he approached this uninvited twist. What would unfold from this dark corridor of yesterday? The figure stood framed in the doorway, obscured by a gentle cascade of light that shielded its identity. Heart pounding, Jake instinctively straightened his posture, forcing himself to present a facade of composure amidst the swirling storm of emotions. Memories rushed back, laden with regret, every moment shared conjured as vivid as the day it happened. Perhaps, he mused, he had opened a Pandora's box. "Jake," the voice echoed, creating ripples in the atmosphere. The tone, layered with familiarity, struck a chord deeper than his conscious self could resist. "Alex?" Every syllable settled on his tongue like an uninvited guest. Alex had once been a mentor, him an eager apprentice. The tides of their relationship had shifted when ambition became selective blindness. Jake's pulse quickened at the thought of all the unsaid words packed with hurt and pride. Alex's gaze swept the room, registering the transformation from corporate shell to community hub shining with purpose. "It looks like you've finally taken the plunge," Alex offered, a hint of skepticism shadowing his voice. "What brings you here?" Jake asked, drawing a deep breath, channeling a cautious eagerness. What could Alex want after all this time? Was this a chance for redemption, or another tether to the past he wished to escape? "I heard about your plans, Jake. The community initiatives." Alex stepped across the threshold, now an unwarranted witness to Jake's vulnerabilities. "Let's be honest. Are you certain this is your way forward? You're no stranger to the business world, but this looks like a distraction." Jake clenched his jaw, the nails of self-doubt piercing through his resolve. Distraction? Maybe Alex had a point. Was he merely chasing a pipe dream to cover up past failures? But had he not expressed a need for genuine human connection in a world previously ruled by bottom lines? "Did you ever think that people are more than metrics?" Jake retorted, his defensive tone surprising even himself. Memories unfolded of business dealings prioritizing contracts over conscience, leaving trails of shattered hopes in their wake. "Oh, but I do know that, Jake. I just think you're trying to take on too much too fast." The weight of Alex's words hung heavy in the air. "You're not just competing against others. You're wrestling with a past you can't ignore. You have to face it, not run from it." His words felt as if they penetrated the stronghold of Jake's mind, facing the past, both liberating and terrifying. Could he really grasp what those words meant? Could he turn the page instead of flipping it over, hoping to forget? "How do you know?" Jake's voice dropped, a mix of defiance and vulnerability shaping his inquiry. "What gives you the right to question me now?" "I saw the rise and fall, Jake." Alex leaned casually against a nearby table, embodying calmness that danced dangerously close to critique. "I know you've changed, but change isn't a switch you flip. It's earned. It's a process." Every challenge he thought he had bravely faced for years bubbled to the surface. Breathless battles fought in silence and shadows. He wanted to scream, to refute Alex's interpretation of his journey. Yet, there was an uncomfortable truth buried underneath their strained history he couldn't shake off. "I can't go back," Jake finally whispered, the weight of his voice revealing layers of unfelt anguish. "I've hurt too many people, including myself. I'm deeper into this than you realize." "Then use that pain," Alex urged, eyes narrowing into a piercing focus. "You can't reshape the world without grappling with your past. It's not just about helping, it's about understanding yourself, your mistakes, and the path you choose forward." A wave of clarity washed over Jake, and the realization hit hard. His struggle was not only with the external world but rooted in his internal conflicts. Could he wield his pain not as a weapon against himself, but as a bridge toward genuine growth? "What if I fail again?" Jake looked directly at Alex, the truth weighing heavily in the silence that followed. Alex straightened, not breaking eye contact. "That's the risk you take for any growth, my friend. But what if you're right where you're supposed to be? What if this conflict is your crucible?" The words ignited a tumult of emotions within Jake, challenging the very fabric of his preconceived identity. Would he risk his carefully preserved stability for an uncertain yet alluring journey toward authenticity? Or would he retreat once more into the shadows of doubt? Just as realization began to crystallize in his mind, the faint sound of urgency echoed from his phone on the table, disrupting the charged moment. A notification that could change everything, an impending meeting about the community project that demanded his immediate attention. Jake felt the pull of duty, the inertia of change battling with the whisper of comfort. Experiences had taught him not to trust easily, yet here he stood, confronted by the very shadow of his past. Could he confront it this time, or would he let the specter slip away once more? The choice loomed large, heavier than any he had faced. As he headed for his phone, one thought resonated deeply. Perhaps the most important question of his life yet awaited him beyond these walls. Would he step outside the comfort of the known, or was he destined to remain shackled by fear? The narrative raced ahead, and in that moment, Jake caught sight of what he might become if he dared to embrace the uncertainty awaiting on the other side. Jake felt the vibrations of his phone digging into his palm, a digital reminder that reality was not waiting for him to sort through his emotional storm. He could almost hear the clock ticking down the seconds, each one a reminder of the imminent meeting that loomed ahead, a gathering that could dictate the next chapter of his endeavor. The faces he'd soon meet were ones he'd yet to confront, unlike Alex, who sat solidly before him with an air of challenging familiarity. "Excuse me," Jake said, forcing himself to step back from the emotional precipice. His voice was steadier than he felt. "I need to prepare." He turned away, moving toward a small table cluttered with notes, designs, and charts meant to outline his vision. Alex followed, an ineffectual shadow at his back. "Jake?" he called out, the urgency in his voice breaking the focus like glass shattering against concrete. "You've got to focus on the right things." That statement was like a punch to the gut. Jake halted in his tracks, grappling with that blunt simplicity. His mind conjured a mental list of everything he had poured into this venture, a chaotic mix of dreams and plans, all fueled by a desire to salvage dignity. "I thought I was," Jake replied, voice barely above a whisper. He pushed papers aside, trying to organize his thoughts in a tangible way. What did focus even mean in this context? Was he meant to leave behind his past urges for validation? Or was it essential to weave them into this new tapestry? "You need to ask yourself," Alex began, stepping closer. "What is motivating you? Is it purely altruistic? Or are you masking deeper insecurities?" The inquiry hung in the air like a heavy mist. Had he masked his fear of failure with purpose? The very thought struck him more powerfully than he anticipated. Because what if Alex was right? The more he wrestled with his motivations, the more elusive they became. Could something born from ambition not also transcend it? Jake turned to face Alex fully. "What's the difference? Can't I just want to help people because I've been hurt?" The defensiveness in his tone was unmistakable. Alex shook his head, a teacher's gentle reprimand. "Intent matters, Jake. If you're feeding an ego, it's just another cycle of damage. You have to draw a solid line between your desire for validation and your commitment to this community." His heart raced as every word resonated with a fresh urgency. The sharpness of Alex's critique punctured Jake's facade. Who did he really want to be? The heat of the moment surged through him, igniting long-dormant thoughts of inadequacy coded in the aspirations of helping others. Jake paced the small room, the tension rising. "You make it sound so easy," he muttered, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "Because it isn't," Alex retorted, his voice dropping to a more serious timbre. "But the first step is recognizing it's worth the struggle. If you're not authentic in this journey, you're hurting more than just yourself." Jake stopped, reflection dawning like a distant revelation. The meeting wasn't just about discussing plans or prospects. It was a crucible where he had to prove himself. More importantly, it was a test of his resolve to reconcile who he was with who he wanted to be. "Then what do I do?" he asked, vulnerability cracking through the bravado that had sustained him until now. "Use this meeting as a catalyst," Alex advised earnestly. "Don't just play the role of a leader, step into it fully, acknowledge your history, don't shy away from it. It feeds your passion if you allow it." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of those words shift something inside him. He could visualize the meeting. The attendees expected a polished pitch, but what they might truly need was his authentic self, fraught with doubts and hope all in one breath. The thought terrified him. "Have you ever stood in front of a crowd?" Jake challenged, his spirit igniting, "and risked everything just by being you?" "Every day," Alex replied steadily. "It's the only way to inspire real change." Jake hesitated for a moment. The stakes were rising higher with each passing second. Could vulnerability really be his strength? As he reached for his phone once more, Its glow illuminated the realization. This wasn't just about community projects. It was about him. Not merely competing against an idea of success, but competing against the remnants of fear etched into his being. With a sudden, decisive stare, Jake met Alex's eyes. "I'm ready." But just as empowerment began to seep through his veins, the notification flickered on the screen. Meeting starting in 5 minutes. In that moment, the door between his past and the potential future swung wide open. Would he walk through it with truth, or would he succumb to the familiar shadows of pretense? The stakes had never felt higher. He took a deep breath, resolving to rise instead of retreat this time. But as he crossed the threshold toward the gathering, the pang of uncertainty tightened around him once more. What waited beyond that door had the power to redefine everything. Would he step into the light of possibility, or drown in self-doubt? That question lingered, propelling him forward into the unknown. Jake stepped through the door, the hum of conversation and the scent of coffee washing over him like a tidal wave. The meeting room was large, filled with faces he didn't recognize, some curious, others impatient. He felt like a novice actor stepping onto a stage, the spotlight unexpectedly bright. The well-rehearsed lines he'd drafted in his mind felt flimsy and inadequate beneath the weight of his resolve. Finding a vacant chair, he took a moment to breathe deeply, drawing on the calm he had cultivated with Alex. He had a choice now. He could either recite the script he had prepared, polished, composed, and emotionally sterile, or he could delve into the more complicated truth that lay beneath the surface of his motivations. The prospect intrigued and terrified him. As the meeting began, Jake shifted nervously, exchanging glances with a few stakeholders, individuals he believed held the keys to his future. Their expressions varied. Some were skeptical, others hopeful, and a few seemed genuinely interested. The presenter, a charismatic woman named Emily, kicked off the meeting with a synopsis of their impending projects. Jake instinctively measured her enthusiasm against his own simmering anxiety. Her confidence painted an image of success that seemed so far from his reality, yet impossibly within reach. When the time finally came for Jake to speak, the room quieted. Eyes turned to him, eager for innovation, but he was met with a tide of doubt. The self-consciousness was stifling, a smothering blanket he had grown tired of wearing. "You need to draw a solid line between your desire for validation and your commitment." Alex's words echoed in his mind like a mantra as Jake stood up, thrusting both hands into his pockets. "I know this sounds a bit uncomfortable," he began, searching for the right words. He took a brief pause, allowing the words to settle. Authenticity needed to be the cornerstone of this moment. He realized he needed to relate to these strangers, not just present facts and figures. "I want to transform not only how we serve food, but how we connect with this community," he continued, heart pounding. "I've lost myself looking for approval in the wrong places." The admission hung heavy in the air. He watched as the doubt faded from some faces, replaced by a flicker of understanding. A few murmured encouragingly. "I didn't always come from a position of strength," he continued, his voice growing steadier. "I started this journey filled with fear, driven by the need to prove myself. But here today I realize that my best contribution is not from a fabricated place of confidence. It's from the very insecurities I carry." As the words flowed from him, Jake felt a surge of liberation. He paused again to gather his thoughts, realizing he was becoming comfortable with his vulnerability. It was terrifying, yet invigorating to speak raw truth in a world so often filled with filtered answers. The crowd's energy shifted as he poured out scenarios where their lives had been spirited by community connection, things he had witnessed, failures he had experienced. He found his rhythm, connected their ambitions to his own. Vulnerability, it turned out, was not painful. It was a bridge drawing them closer together. By the time he concluded his remarks, a palpable sense of solidarity had emerged in the room. He had not just spoken to inform, he had invited them into an ongoing dialogue. As he sat down, the grateful glances from his audience ignited a flicker of hope within him. But as he settled back into his chair, adrenaline coursing through his veins, he quickly realized that despite the initial success, the road ahead was still fraught with uncertainty. Questions lingered around the table, probing the depths of his vision, and more critically, the depths of his commitment. "Do you really believe we can create a real impact?" one man asked. "What makes you different this time?" The weight of that query settled over him like a fog. He had shown authenticity, but his fight against self-doubt was far from over. The specter of his past still loomed, ready to challenge him at any turn. Jake locked eyes with the individual, the challenge sparking a sense of resolve within him. "Because I am my own measure of success," he declared, voice unwavering. "And I'm not here to mask my past. I'm here to make it part of our future." With those words delivered, time felt suspended. Each heartbeat resonated like a drum, heralding a call to action that he could not ignore. Would he maintain this momentum and carve out a legacy rooted in authenticity? The answer rested somewhere ahead, tangled in ambition and the harsh truths he had only hinted at. What lay beyond this moment, the questions that had emerged, could lead him to either his downfall or his empowerment. As the room erupted in discussion, Jake's thoughts raced ahead. The real challenge lay not only in convincing these stakeholders but in proving to himself that he could indeed forge this new path with confidence and truth. What awaited him beyond these conversations, beyond this day? The looming uncertainty stood like a door ready to be opened, hiding yet another truth about himself that he had yet to uncover. Would he dare to find it? Jake remained in his seat, adrenaline still buzzing in his veins as conversations swirled around him. Each voice seemed a thread, some weaving encouragement, others probing and challenging. He glanced around the room, gauging reactions, but his focus remained fixed on that one question that loomed large. What makes you different this time? The intensity of that inquiry hung in the air like a challenge he couldn't escape. He knew he had exposed a vulnerable part of himself in that moment, but he also felt the heavy weight of his own insecurities pressing down. Previously, he could have deflected by compartmentalizing. Now, however, he was expected to confront it head-on. Closing his eyes for a brief second, Jake dug deeper into the well of his emotions. The truth was there, painful, raw, yet undeniably powerful. This wasn't merely about convincing the stakeholders but also about reshaping his entire narrative, transforming doubt into determination. He recalled Alex's advice. "Own your story, Jake." With a newfound conviction, he stood up again, disrupting the ongoing conversations. "I know asking me what makes me different feels like a valid point of skepticism," he started, a steadiness returning to his voice. "But let me tell you how the path I've taken has shaped me." He took a deep breath, envisioning the audience shifts, leaning forward, eyes focused. "For years I wore a mask of confidence, suggesting I had it all figured out. Behind that mask was a person who lacked faith in himself, terrified of being exposed. Perhaps that's what's different. I'm not here simply as a businessman. I'm embracing my journey of failures and victories alike." Quiet absorbed the room, every eye fixed on him, urging him to continue. Jake was surprised by his own clarity. With each word, he wove together elements of personal stories, confronting his failures in previous projects, and how those failures had revealed not only what he lacked but also what he could become. Every time I stumbled," he continued, voices of self-doubt echoing in his mind, "I discovered pieces of who I am beneath the facade I presented. Today, I'm ready to collaborate, to expose my truth, and truly engage with what we can create together." As he concluded, he noted how the crowd shifted again. The flicker of doubt had morphed into an ember of trust. Yet, beneath that surface, Jake sensed the tension within himself mounting as lingering questions slipped into his mind. Would this sincerity hold under scrutiny? Could he actually sustain this new narrative? Or would the weight of his past rise up to obscure his progress? The meeting evolved, and dialogues transformed into brainstorming sessions. Jake contributed eagerly, suggesting innovative ideas about community partnerships and menu changes that would better represent their diversity. The conversations became vibrant, fueled by a sense of possibility, yet his mind kept wandering to a darker thought. Each positive interaction fed a counter-thought that nagged at him. This is too good to be true. As the meeting concluded, Jake stole a glance at the stakeholders' faces, searching for any residual doubt. They clapped as he left the room, their encouragement resonating more profoundly than he anticipated. Yet, the internal struggle didn't dissipate. This was only the beginning. Stepping outside into fresh air, he exhaled slowly, relishing the crisp embrace of reality. He had shared a part of himself, but the challenges ahead still loomed, a landscape peppered with tests of his integrity and commitments to navigate. What if he faltered? Would he crumble under the strain of expectation, the fear of reverting to the person he once was? Or would this new foundation of authenticity fortify him against the inevitable pressures? With these questions swirling in his mind, his phone buzzed, an unknown number illuminating the screen. It was a call that could change everything as he prepared himself for the conversation that awaited. Would this be a moment of opportunity, or yet another test of his resolve? Jake's pulse quickened as he swiped to answer the call, uncertainty mingling with anticipation. "Hello?" A voice filled with warmth responded. "Jake Ballard. This is Sarah from LinkedIn. I came across your profile and wanted to connect." Familiar yet entirely unfamiliar, Jake wrestled with the implications of her words. Networking had always felt like walking a tightrope, balancing professional ambition with the fear of exposure. "Thank you for reaching out, Sarah. What can I help you with today?" There was a measured pause before she replied. "I've been following your recent work, and I think your insights into the hospitality industry are fascinating. I'd love to discuss a potential collaboration." The words drifted into his mind, planting seeds of opportunity while heightening his insecurities. "A collaboration?" he echoed, tilting his head slightly as the fresh air wrapped around him turned brisk. "What exactly did you have in mind?" She outlined her vision, a culinary initiative aimed at blending diverse flavors while promoting local farmers. It was a noble concept, but also a daunting prospect. Jake felt a flicker of excitement. This could be the collaboration that not only enhanced his profile but also granted him another avenue to prove his worth. Yet beneath the surface his internal war stirred. Was he truly capable of delivering on such a project? Or would it expose further cracks in the carefully built facade? "I see the potential," he said, trying to keep his voice even. "But I'd need to know more about what you envision and how I can contribute meaningfully." A moment passed, and he sensed the opportunity slipping, yet trying to hold on. The conversation picked up pace as Sarah shared details, her enthusiasm infectious. As she spoke about sourcing ingredients sustainably and creating impactful community events, he could picture each facet, but shadows of doubt lingered at the edges of his enthusiasm. His own history of backtracking and second-guessing haunted him. "Jake, I believe this initiative could really make waves," Sarah concluded, a hopeful lilt in her voice. "But I want to streamline it. Could we meet next week to discuss this in detail? I think you'd bring a unique perspective." Just like that, a door swung open. "Of course, I'd love to," he replied, his voice betraying a hint of eagerness. "How about Wednesday?" After confirming the details, they exchanged pleasantries before hanging up. Jake felt momentarily buoyed by the prospect of this collaboration, like a ship whose sails had finally caught wind. But with the initial thrill came a creeping dread. What if he faltered again? 1,000 questions circulated through his thoughts. How would he tackle the logistics? What if he couldn't articulate his vision? With each question arose another layer of self-doubt threatening to envelop his resolve. He needed to be ready. Preparation would be his greatest ally. Fueled by this new sense of urgency, Jake decided to dive into research about sourcing practices, menu creation, and community engagement strategies. The world of culinary innovation awaited him, and he refused to let hesitation take root in this fertile ground of potential. The night stretched on as he jotted down notes, crafting ideas and outlining strategies. For the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. Yet despite the warmth of inspiration, he couldn't shake the cold weight of his past decisions. Would these preparations be enough? Could he truly transform from what he had been into the business partner Sarah believed he could be? As the clock ticked on, Jake leaned back, closing his eyes. Somewhere within him, An unease thrummed like a taut string ready to snap. Suddenly, the phone buzzed again, another unknown number. Tension coiled in his gut. Was it an echo of the past, or could it be yet another chance to solidify his new identity? He took a deep breath, mind racing, and answered without hesitation, ready to confront another unexpected turn in the narrative of his professional journey. The voice on the other end was unmistakably familiar, a mix of nostalgia and regret intertwined with a hint of anger. "Jake Ballard, it's Greg, we need to talk." Jake's heart sank at the sound of his once closest colleague. Their shared history was fraught with unaddressed tensions that had bubbled to the surface after their falling out. Greg had once been a mentor, a guide through the murky waters of the hospitality industry, but their relationship soured when Jake's ambition began to outpace the safety of conformity. "What is it, Greg?" he replied, striving to keep his tone neutral despite the rush of emotions. "It's about that project you're working on with Sarah," Greg said, his voice low and measured. "You think you can just waltz back into the scene after everything?" Jake felt a tightness grip his chest. "I'm not getting back into anything, Greg. I have a chance to do something meaningful. This has nothing to do with the past." A pause loomed over the call, heavy with unspoken grievances. "You're building something, without understanding the foundation. You can't just jump in when you left the rest of us to cover for your mistakes." There was an accusation laced within Greg's words that cut deeper than Jake dared to admit. An uncomfortable truth hovered in his mind, the question of whether he truly had learned anything from his past missteps. "I appreciate your concern," Jake replied, his voice barely steady. "But I know what I'm doing now." "Do you?" Greg pressed. "Because that would be a first. You always second-guessed yourself, made decisions that seemed right until they weren't." With his temper rising, Jake shot back, "And you think that's all I am? A string of failures? I'm working to improve myself, Greg. I'm trying to make an impact." Another silence stretched while Jake felt his own self-doubt creeping back. Was this call a reckoning or a reminder of his past? "Just remember," Greg finally replied, "there are real consequences when you don't take responsibility for your actions. You might fail again when it matters most. I'll be watching closely." The call ended abruptly, leaving Jake agitated and uncertain. He fought against the wave of inadequacy rising within him, but couldn't shake the sting of Greg's words. He thought of Sarah's optimism, that initial thrill of opportunity. Was it all really so fragile? Did he harbor the capacity to rise above the shadows of his own choices, or were those doubts destined to haunt him? Determined not to let Greg's skepticism ground him, Jake immersed himself in preparations for the meeting with Sarah. Borders between excitement and anxiety blurred as he sketched not just culinary concepts but frameworks for personal growth that intertwined with the overarching project. He crafted notes not simply on ingredients and sourcing, but on managing his vulnerabilities and confronting the past that so easily threatened to spill into his present. In the quiet of his workspace, he revisited moments where he had stumbled and transformed them into lessons. Each mistake and triumph took on heightened significance, showing him not just who he was but who he aspired to become. He had spent too long existing in the shadows. Now he must find a way to step forward. As dawn crept in, illuminating the room with potential, Jake looked over the feast of ideas he had compiled. The once taut string of uncertainty began to loosen, a long-needed spark of belief igniting inside him. However, lingering questions remained unanswered. Could he truly manifest change this time? With a deep breath, he pulled up the email to Sarah, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. In that moment, Jake understood that this opportunity wasn't just about building an innovative culinary project. It was a calling to confront his past mantras and rewrite his narrative. Just as he made a decision to solidify his plans, another message appeared on his screen from an unknown number. Heart racing, he opened it, sensing that whatever it contained could shift the course of his life once more. The throbbing pulse of anticipation quickened inside Jake as he opened the message, words from the unknown sender bleeding into his awareness. "We need to talk about your plans for the community project." A sudden tension gripped him. Could it be someone with reservations, further doubt threatening to interject into his burgeoning confidence? Or maybe it was Sarah, seeking clarity or guidance before their meeting. Regardless, there was no ignoring the imperative to address whatever awaited him. With fingers trembling, he typed a swift reply. "Who is this?" Waiting for a response, he allowed his mind to wander through the maze of what this could mean. Everything he had worked to redevelop, his vision for real community impact, his efforts to redefine how he viewed success, felt precarious against this new shadow of uncertainty. The response came almost immediately. "It's Greg again. I have insights on the project you might want to hear." Jake felt conflicted. The idea of involving his past brought up ghosts he wasn't ready to face. Yet at the same time, he understood that avoiding confrontation would only permit those ghosts to haunt him further. "All right, let's meet to discuss," he typed, his resolve strengthening with each keystroke. If Greg had insights worth sharing, he would show that he was open to feedback, ready to navigate the complexities of their past, and prepared to learn and grow from this encounter rather than conceal. Upon agreeing to a meetup in the cafe near the restaurant, Jake shifted his thoughts back to his upcoming conversation with Sarah. No matter how daunting Greg's insights may be, he was determined to focus on constructing a bridge that merged his past with the potential future he envisioned. As the clock edged closer and the day unfolded, the stakes of his choices swelled. He had aimed to return, not just as a businessman, but as a custodian of his community. Today was not simply about survival in the dining industry, it was a conscious evolution of self. Arriving at the cafe, Jake found Greg already seated, tapping his fingers against a cup, all signs of impatience etched on his face. The years of camaraderie and rivalry between them loomed heavy, but Jake squared his shoulders and reminded himself that success demanded confronting hard truths. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," he said, steady in his demeanor, suppressing the tensions of the past. Greg regarded him critically. "You might actually want to listen this time. I've heard some feedback about your approach, some concerns that could derail everything before it has a chance to begin." Jake nodded, preparing himself for the potential flood of critiques. "I'm all ears," he replied, his heart racing not with fear, but with the excitement of addressing what had been restraining him for so long. "You talk a lot about community, Jake. But will your real motive hold when things get tough?" Greg leaned in, voice conspirative. "Are you seeking redemption for past mistakes? Or do you genuinely want to help those who you've sidelined before? Trust me, they can always sense insincerity." The weight of Greg's words echoed painfully yet openly, exposing that core conflict he had feared. Could he transcend the inherent caution wrapped around his ambition? Would the flames of his past ambitions rend his ability to forge authentic relationships within the community? "Honestly," Jake replied, the intensity of the confrontation pushing him to new clarity, "I want to make a difference. I know the shadows of my past weigh heavily, and it's what drives me to be vulnerable. I need that to be part of this journey. I'm okay with the pain as long as I can use it to help." For a moment, Greg simply studied Jake, contemplating the unfolding narrative. "If you're willing to dive deep into what makes this meaningful and how you're positioned to do so, then maybe you're ready. But don't underestimate the work ahead. It might require re-examining everything you've believed. The community needs leaders who understand the shadows, not just the light." Jake felt both daunted and liberated by the challenge. "Then I'll show them," he declared. "I'll confront those shadows and dive into transparency. I want to ensure this project is about human connection, not just numbers. I need that challenge." "What if it's too much?" Greg asked softly, the previous tension easing into a curious partnership. "It will be," Jake admitted, the truth sinking in with unexpected ease. "But I think it's worth it. The worth isn't in success at all. It's in how we navigate through the inevitable troubles." Greg's lips curled into an appreciative grin. They exchanged the weight of understanding, a mutual recognition of resilience. "Let's see where this goes, then." After their conversation, Jake left the cafe feeling buoyed with a newfound sense of purpose. He had begun to mesh the duality of his journey, those past ambitions containing shadows and the light of connection leading the way forward. When he met Sarah days later, standing confidently with a pitch crafted from authenticity and pivotal lessons learned, He felt the depth of his growth coursing through him. He laid out the foundation for their collaboration, rooted in community impact rather than mere financial metrics. Let's create programs that not only engage our diners but also tells their stories, celebrates their roots, he encouraged. I'm no longer the businessman chasing validation. I am an advocate ready to embrace the challenge of satisfying deeper needs. Sarah's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. That's it, Jake, that's what we need. As they crafted plans moving forward, Jake recognized the thread of perseverance and authenticity buoying him. He knew there would be obstacles, critiques, and more challenges ahead, but he finally felt he had secured a foothold in a landscape where doubt once reigned. Confirmation washed over him, solidifying a sense of profound clarity. Jake Anderson was no longer just the wealthy owner of a restaurant. He had evolved into a nurturer of connection, intertwining ambition with genuine compassion. At that moment, he realized he had achieved personal significance far beyond the financial accomplishments. The best redemption came from accepting his past and ushering it into a future focused on true impact. With each step forward, Jake found profound satisfaction as he emerged fully into his redefined role, fully understanding that his journey was his greatest teacher, and in turn, the community they aimed to uplift would echo this very truth. Jake walked away from that meeting with solid confidence in his intentions and a renewed sense of purpose towards navigating the road ahead. Each conversation, every step into vulnerability was turning into concrete achievement worth pursuing. The world before him was filled with possibilities, beautiful connections forged out of struggle, and as he reflected on that, a fire sparked within him, promising fulfillment stitched into every layer of this vibrant journey. Change, he realized, had not just been an abstract idea but had taken residence in the authenticity of his worth, a reflection mirrored in the community he yearned to touch. Now was the time to act without fear, to embrace the path of personal authenticity without apology. So show your support. You need to subscribe now, so you never miss these exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and let the world know these narratives matter. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jake's journey. Don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who crave inspiration and transformation.